It was a Thursday in July 2017. The kind of Lagos rain that doesn't just fall, it attacks. The sky ripped open without any warning, just as the Danfo bus from Oberland lurched onto the third mainland bridge. One moment, the afternoon sun was roasting the roofs of cars, and the next, water was slapping the windscreen like a punishment. Inside the bus, 35 complete strangers instantly became one very unhappy family. The driver killed the engine and announced in that classic Lagos fashion, "Engine don knock. Makuna manage." A collective groan rose from the passengers. Someone started cursing in Igbo. A woman with a baby strapped to her back began to pray loudly in Yoruba. The conductor, seemingly unfazed, slid open the door, and the rain rushed in like an unwanted, aggressive guest. Chika sat by the window, her arms folded tightly over the plastic bag on her lap. Inside was the new Ankara fabric she had just bought from Balagan Market. She'd managed to bargain the trader down from 12,000 to 9,500, and she was still mentally congratulating herself on the victory when the rain started. Now, the bag was getting soaked. The vibrant colors of the Ankara would surely spot and bleed, and she still had to find her way all the way to Ketu before it got dark. The city felt like it was conspiring against her. The man sitting beside her shifted. He had been completely silent the entire journey, with his earphones in, nodding gently to whatever music was playing. But now, he pulled one earphone out and looked at her. "Madam, your bag goes so-go," he said. His voice was low and calm, the kind of calm that felt expensive and out of place in the chaos of Lagos. She glanced at him properly for the first time. He was tall, even while seated, with a neat low haircut and small, precise tribal marks, 3 neat lines on each cheek. He wore a simple gray shirt, its sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and had a black backpack placed between his feet. "I know," she replied, trying her best to sound unbothered, even though panic was creeping in. "Nothing I fit do." He reached into his backpack, rummaged around for a moment, and then brought out a small, foldable umbrella, the expensive kind. He offered it to her without any ceremony. "When we reach the next bus stop, use this one. I go manage." Chika just stared at the umbrella as if it were a bar of gold. In that moment, it felt like one. "You sure?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. He smiled. It was a small, slightly crooked, but completely genuine smile. "I dey sure. I know be my first rain for Lagos." After about 20 minutes of collective prayer, some pushing, and a lot of shouting, the driver miraculously started the engine again. The bus coughed out a cloud of black smoke and began to crawl forward. When they finally reached Oberland, the rain hadn't reduced one bit. People spilled out of the bus, running, shouting, slipping on the wet ground. It was pure chaos. Chika was the last to step down. And there he was. The man from the bus was waiting for her under the shelter of his umbrella, holding it high enough for 2. "I take for road today," he said, stating the obvious with another one of those calm smiles. "I fit drop you small." So they walked together to the small park where the buses for Ketu and Ojoto were loading. The umbrella was truly small, designed for one person, which meant their shoulders kept touching every few seconds. He didn't move away, and she didn't either. It was a strange, unexpected bubble of comfort in the middle of the storm. "My name na Emeka," he said, breaking the silence. "Chika," she replied. "You sell for market?" he asked. "Recharge card and small provisions for Ketu." "You. I day repair phone for Computer Village." They reached the Ketu bus. It was almost full. Chika hesitated. The polite thing to do was to just say thank you, get on the bus, and end the interaction. But her mouth had other plans. "You fit collect my number? So you go fit collect your umbrella back." He laughed softly, a warm sound against the drumming of the rain. "I no need him back, but I fit collect the number." She called out the digits, her heart beating a little faster than usual. He saved it in his phone as Umbrella Girl. Just then, the bus conductor shouted, "Ketu, enter with your change, oh." She quickly climbed in. He handed her the umbrella through the window. "See you, Umbrella Girl," he said. The bus pulled away, and Chika watched him standing there in the rain until the conductor slammed the door shut and he was gone from view. That night, she lay on her small bed in her Face Me I Face You apartment in Alipare and just stared at the umbrella. It was black, strong, with a sturdy wooden handle. She opened and closed it 3 times, just like a child does when they receive a gift that feels too good to be true. 3 days later, Her phone rang while she was busy arranging MTN cards in her kiosk. It was an unknown number. "Hello," she answered. A familiar, calm voice came through the line. "Umbrella Girl. This is the owner of the umbrella. Ide Road to K2. Hope say you never sell my umbrella." She laughed so loud that the woman buying Glow credit turned to look at her. That evening, Emeka came. He brought Fanyogo for her, remembering she'd mentioned liking cold things on the day they met on the bridge. They sat on two plastic chairs outside her kiosk and talked for hours, until the power went out and the mosquitoes drove them inside. By the end of the month, he was coming to see her every single day after work. Sometimes he'd bring his tools and fix her small, stubborn generator that always refused to start. Sometimes she'd save some of the mwamwa she sold in the morning for him. One evening in September, while they were eating bowl and groundnut by the roadside, he asked her to be his girlfriend. She said yes before he could even finish the sentence. It all started on a Thursday in July, with a rainstorm that felt like an attack. A knocked engine on the third mainland bridge, a drenched Ankara fabric, and 35 unhappy strangers. But in the middle of all that Lagos chaos, a simple act of kindness, the offer of an umbrella, changed everything. It was the day the rain didn't just fall, it brought two people together. Their story didn't start with fireworks or a grand gesture, but with a sudden downpour on Third Mainland Bridge. A Danfo's engine sputtered and died, and a shared umbrella brought Emeka and Chika together. It was a simple, everyday moment, but it sparked something extraordinary. Emeka, with his gentle voice and quick hands, fixed more than just her mother's broken radio. He mended a space in her heart she didn't know was empty. Her mother saw it too. She saw the respect in his eyes when he knelt to greet her, the kindness in his actions, and gave her blessing without a second thought. 2 years later, almost to the day, another rain fell. This time, it drummed against the roof of the Ikoyi registry as they said, "I do." The sky itself seemed to be a witness, weeping tears of joy. As they ran to their car, huddled under that same black umbrella, Emeka looked at Chika, his hair dripping, and laughed. "See what one umbrella cost," he said. Chika, her heart full, pressed her new wedding ring against his cheek. "It was the best broken-down engine I've ever seen," she replied. The rain poured, but under their small canopy, they were safe, warm, and everything felt possible. That faithful black umbrella found a new home on a nail behind the door of their one-room apartment in Ojota. The room was small, just 12 feet by 10, with a tired cream paint and a faded Ankara curtain that bravely separated their sleeping area from the living space. Their first marital blessing wasn't a fancy gift, but a second-hand mattress, thick and firm, bought from a woman moving to Canada. It didn't sag, and to them, it was more valuable than gold. There was no money for a lavish honeymoon, just a quiet weekend in Badagry. They ate fresh fish by the shore and fell asleep to the soothing sound of the waves. It was all they needed. The Monday after, Emeka was back at his post in Computer Village. His shop was a tiny glass box, tucked away on the ground floor of a building that smelled permanently of solder and ambition. He had painted the sign himself, Emitech, phone and laptop doctor. Fast and reliable. Customers called him engineer, a title he wore with humble pride, even with just an OND from Yabatech. His real education came from experience. From 7 in the morning until 8 at night, he was a surgeon for SICK Electronics, his hands a blur of motion over cracked screens and water-damaged motherboards. He had a sixth sense for technology, able to diagnose a software glitch just from a phone's vibration or revive an iPhone that had taken a swim. On a good day, he could make 15,000 naira. On a bad day, 4,000. Every single kobo was accounted for. He kept a small, neat notebook, recording each job, the cost of parts, and his daily expenses for transport and food. Whatever was left, he carefully folded into a white envelope marked simply, Future. Chika's day started even earlier. At 6:30 a.m., she'd open her small wooden kiosk, painted green and yellow like the Nigerian flag, on the busy road connecting Ojota and K2. Her shop was a miniature universe of daily needs. Recharge cards pinned to a board like colorful butterflies, biscuits, sweets, sanitary pads, and pure water. She sat on a low stool, greeting every customer by name, her smile a constant source of warmth. She had a special soft spot for the children, always giving an extra sweet to those who greeted her with respect. Like Emeka, She was a meticulous bookkeeper. Her own notebook was smaller, with pages torn from an old-school exercise book, but her accounting was just as precise. Every sale, down to the last kobo, was recorded. At night, their small room transformed into the headquarters of their shared dream. They would sit on the mattress, their backs against the wall, and spread their notebooks out like accountants reviewing the books of a secret bank. "I made 9,400 today," Emeka would say, his voice tired but proud. "I made 7,850, Chika would reply, her own fatigue lifting as they tallied their day's success. They would add their earnings together, then meticulously subtract their expenses: 25,000 for rent, the unpredictable NEPA bill, church offerings, transport, and food. The remainder, the fruit of their long day's labor, had a special destination. It went into a wooden box kept securely under their bed. The box was Emeka's idea. He had bought it from a carpenter in Ikeja, plain plywood that he sanded smooth himself. In bold blue marker, he wrote 2 words on the lid: Taif's future. Taif, their child, who was still just a dream, a hope they were building 1 naira at a time. The first 10,000 naira they saved after their wedding went into that box. Chika kissed the notes before placing them inside. "Grow well," she whispered, the same way her mother would talk to seeds before planting them in the earth, praying for a bountiful harvest. Their life became a testament to that prayer. They lived small so their dream could grow big. Eating out, even as a Sunday treat, became a thing of the past. Chika became a master of stretching resources, learning to cook large pots of stew on Saturday that would last them through the week. Emeka's wardrobe consisted of old shirts he mended with stitches so tiny they were nearly invisible. When his own phone screen cracked, he didn't dream of buying a new one. He took it apart and fixed it himself. Chika kept her hair in simple, neat braids for months on end to save money. They cut out all the small luxuries that drain a wallet unnoticed. No more casual bedding, no more treating themselves to a cold malt after church. They eliminated everything that wasn't as essential as the air they breathed. Their neighbors didn't always understand. "You too are suffering for love," Sister Bose would tease them with a laugh. "Enjoy life a little." But Emeka and Chika had seen a different reality. They had seen the cautionary tales all around them. People who enjoyed today only to weep tomorrow. Emeka's own elder brother was a painful example. He had thrown a massive wedding, rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Lekki he couldn't afford, and bought a car on hire purchase. Now, the bank had taken everything, and he was forced to sleep on the floor of a friend's shop. Chika had seen it too. Her cousin had spent lavishly on lace and asoebi for every party, only to find herself desperately begging for money on WhatsApp when she needed an emergency C-section. Chika and Emeka knew that true security wasn't in fleeting pleasures, but in building a solid foundation, brick by brick, kobo by kobo. They chose discipline over temporary enjoyment, sacrifice over instant gratification. Their focus was singular, their resolve unbreakable. Every single day was a step towards Taif's future. A future they were building not with loans or luck, but with their own 2 hands, their shared love, and the quiet, unwavering hope held within a simple wooden box. They wanted none of that shame, so they counted every kobo. They named the wooden box the way other people named children. Some nights Emeka would lift the lid just to smell the money and smile. "Our Pekin day grow," he would say, meaning our child is growing. Chika would rub her palm over the neat stacks of naira and answer, "Ego grow past us. It will grow bigger than us." In 2020, COVID-19 came and tried to kill their plan. Computer Village shut down for weeks. Chika's little kiosk gathered dust. They had to survive on the money inside that wooden box, taking out only what they needed for food and rent. As soon as the shops reopened, they started putting back whatever they could, little by little. The box grew slower that year, but it didn't die. It survived. By the end of 2021, the box held 168,000 naira. They carried it into their room like a newborn baby, laid it on the mattress, and danced. A quiet, joyful dance so the landlord downstairs wouldn't shout at them. They were so proud. Emeka then opened a small Pompey account in Chika's name. This was a smart move. He started moving 20,000 naira every month from his daily savings into that account. The wooden box became their emergency fund, a last resort. The real money, their future, would now grow where power outages and armed robbers couldn't touch it. They never argued about money. Not once. This is rare, you know. Whenever temptation came knocking, and it always does, like a new iPhone on credit, or a naming ceremony they were invited to, or a friend's wedding where you expected to spray at least 10,000 naira just to not disgrace yourself, they would just look at each other. And in that look, they would remember the wooden box. They'd remember their goal. That was enough. People around them thought they were stingy, but they weren't stingy. They were terrified of poverty. Terrified in the same way some people are terrified of heights. It was a visceral fear. So every decision, big or small, had to pass through a silent, internal court. The only question that mattered was, will this thing push our future forward, or will it drag it back? And so the years went by. Morning after morning, Emeka would kiss Chika goodbye at 5:45 a.m. He'd walk to the bus stop and get into the same Danfo bus that always smelled of petrol, sweat, and a million unspoken dreams, just like his. And morning after morning, Chika would open her kiosk, smile at her first customer of the day, and carefully write down the first sale in her torn exercise book. Night after night, they would review their 2 notebooks, check on their wooden box, and nurture their one shared dream. It was growing slowly, steadily, like a determined child learning to walk, no matter how many times the ground shakes. They were poor, yes, but they were incredibly rich in tomorrow. Chika turned 33 on a quiet Tuesday in April 2019. There was no cake, no party, just a text from her mother at 6:03 a.m. that read, "My daughter, happy birthday. This year, God will answer that prayer we have been praying since. Amen." That prayer had only one line. Let my womb open before it is too late. In her community, every older woman in the church had a cautionary tale about waiting too long. There was Sister Grace, who married at 35 and supposedly carried a pregnancy for 11 years. There was Auntie Ngozi, who spent millions on IVF until her husband ran away with a younger girl. Even the pastor's wife had once whispered to Chika after a midweek service, "My sister, the clock does not wait for a woman. Oh, you need to be quick." Chika felt that clock ticking in her bones. She felt it when she woke up in the middle of the night and the room was just too quiet, too still. She felt it when she saw the small children playing in the compound, and her chest would tighten with a feeling that was a strange mix of love and sheer panic. Emeka was 31. He never rushed her in public. He was always gentle and supportive. But Chika saw it. She saw the way his eyes would follow fathers carrying babies on their shoulders. She saw how he would linger whenever he repaired phones for young mothers who came into his shop with toddlers strapped to their backs. One day, a woman left her baby with him for just 30 minutes while she went to the ATM to withdraw money. Emeka held that child the entire time, rocking him gently, singing old Igbo lullabies under his breath. He was a natural. When the mother returned, Emeka handed the baby back with a softness in his eyes that Chika had never seen before. It was a look of deep longing. That night, she finally asked him, "You want a child?" He looked at her for a long, long time, his gaze steady. And he said, "I want what you want." So she began tracking her cycle with the same focus a trader tracks the dollar exchange rate. She bought ovulation strips from a pharmacy in Maryland and hid them inside an empty Indomie noodle carton. Every month, when her period came, a wave of disappointment would wash over her. She would go quiet for 2 days. Emeka never asked why. He just knew. And on those days, he would come home with her favorite snack, roasted plantain and groundnuts, without her ever having to ask. They got married on the 20th of July, 2019. The reception was small, but the prayer warriors were many. Chika's mother had invited every prayer champion she knew from their church. They laid hands on Chika's stomach before she even had a chance to change out of her wedding gown. One woman prayed so loud, the whole canopy shook. She shouted, "Every closed womb, open by fire." 3 weeks later, Chika woke up feeling nauseous. She thought it was just the rich, oily rice and stew she'd eaten the night before. But the nausea stayed. Then, her breasts began to ache, a tender, persistent ache. She told herself it was just malaria. She went and bought malaria medicine. But the nausea just laughed at the medicine. It didn't go away. Something was different. Very different. It was a Wednesday evening when Chika decided to close her kiosk a little earlier than usual. She walked across the street, right to the pharmacy opposite the bus stop. In her purse were her last 2,000 naira, and she used it to buy a pregnancy test. All the way home, She hid it inside her bra, a small secret held close to her heart. When she got home, her husband, Emeka, was in their room, eating Gary and groundnut soup. He looked up, saw the expression on her face, and immediately knew something was up. "What had happened?" he asked, his voice full of concern. Chika couldn't find the words. She just disappeared behind the curtain that separated their room, peed on the little plastic stick, and then sat on the edge of the mattress, waiting. Her heart was pounding so hard she could count the beats. 2 minutes felt like a lifetime. Finally, she picked up the test and walked back out, holding it like it was burning her fingers. She showed it to Emeka. 2 pink lines. They were strong, impossible to mistake. Emeka stared at the test. Then he stared at her, his eyes wide. Without a word, he dropped his plate of Gary on the floor. The spoon, the soup, everything spilled. And right there, in the middle of the mess, he knelt down. "Chika," he whispered, his voice trembling. "We don't get Pekin?" That's when the tears started for Chika. They were happy tears, but also frightened tears. Tears that held 33 years of waiting, of hoping, of praying. Emeka joined her, his own tears mixing with hers. They just held each other there on the floor, laughing and crying at the same time, a messy, beautiful storm of emotions. They were so loud that their neighbor had to knock on the wall and ask if someone had died. For weeks, they kept their precious secret to themselves. They just wanted to be sure, to let the reality sink in. But soon, the signs became undeniable. At 6 weeks, Chika started vomiting. She couldn't keep anything down, not even water. Emeka, ever the devoted husband, started closing his shop by 4 p.m. every single day. He'd rush to buy her coconut water and Lipton tea, anything that might soothe her stomach. He even learned how to make okra soup without oil, because the smell of oil made her nausea even worse. There were nights she'd be kneeling over a bucket at 2 a.m., her body heaving. Emeka would be right there beside her, rubbing her back, whispering soft words of encouragement. "Hold on, Mama Taif," he'd say, using the nickname they'd already chosen. Ego soon pass. But it didn't pass quickly. By the 4th month, a new problem arose. Her blood pressure started to climb. The doctor at their local clinic in K2 took one look at her chart, wrote preeclampsia risk, and referred her to Lasith, the big teaching hospital. The experience there was overwhelming. The queues were incredibly long, the heat was suffocating, and Chika fainted twice just waiting for her file. The second time it happened, Emeka couldn't take it anymore. He scooped her up in his arms, just like he did on their wedding day, and started shouting until a nurse finally brought a chair for her. They decided they couldn't continue like that. They found a private hospital in Bagada. The doctor there was calm, patient, and he called Chika by her first name, which made all the difference. But this level of care came at a price. Every visit, every blood test, every scan, every pack of small, expensive drugs cost money they hadn't budgeted for. Emeka had to sell his spare generator. Chika stopped buying new wrappers for herself. Their little wooden savings box, where they kept their money, was opened again and again. It gave and gave until it was almost empty. By the time Chika was 6 months pregnant, her ankles had swollen and disappeared. Her face became round like a full moon. Simple things, like bending down to tie her wrapper, became impossible. Some nights, Emeka would bathe her, pouring warm water gently over her body, singing Igbo worship songs completely off-key. Whenever she cried out of sheer frustration and exhaustion, he would wipe her face and tell her, "You strong past 10 men. This Pekin go come out thanking you." And the baby inside her seemed to agree, kicking hard as if impatient to join the world. They had already chosen the names months ago. If it was a boy, Chukwamika Jadena. If it was a girl, Taifiawa Ifioma. Every night, they would talk to her belly, taking turns. "Be gentle with your mama, oh," Emeka would plead. Chika would laugh and add, "Don't stress your daddy. He never chopped since morning." Then, on the 12th of February, 2020, at exactly 3:17 in the morning, Chika's water broke. Emeka shot up from his sleep like a soldier on high alert. He carried her out to the street, found an Okada rider, and just shouted, "Bagada General, fast, my wife day labor." The labor was long and grueling. 19 hours. Chika tore. She pushed until her voice was raw and cracked. At one point, she begged them to just cut her open and take the baby out. The nurses were firm but encouraging, shouting, "Push, madam, push." Through it all, Emeka held her hand, squeezing it so tight she thought her bones might break. With the final push, she let out one long scream. It was a scream that contained every single prayer her mother had ever prayed for her, every hope, every fear. And then a cry, a small, wet, angry cry that cut through the exhaustion in the room. The nurse lifted up the baby, all slippery and red, and announced, "Find baby girl." With hands that were shaking uncontrollably, Emeka cut the umbilical cord. They placed the tiny child on Chica's chest. She was perfect. Her eyes were squeezed shut. Her little mouth was open in what looked like a permanent protest against the world she'd just entered. Chica looked at Emeka. Emeka looked at Chica. No words were needed. Only tears. Later, when they were finally alone, Emeka reached out and touched the baby's cheek with one finger. He whispered, "Typhola Waif, thank you for choosing us." And outside the labor ward, the very same Lagos rain that had brought them together 4 years earlier began to fall again, soft and steady. Inside that room, a new life had begun. It was a life paid for with blood, with sweat, and with every last kobo they had so carefully saved. The wooden box was nearly empty now, but their future had arrived, screaming and alive, in their arms. She was already loved beyond any measure. The first time Typhola Waif opened her eyes properly, Chica felt like the entire world just paused for a moment. It was 3 days after the delivery, and they were in the postnatal ward at Bagata General. The ward was hot and noisy, filled with the sounds of other crying babies and tired mothers. But in that instant, when Typh looked straight at Chica, everything else just went silent. Her eyes were so dark, so huge, they looked ancient. It was as if this tiny little child had already seen the whole world, with all its troubles, and had decided to forgive it anyway. Chica leaned in close and whispered, "Welcome, my madam." Typhola Waif blinked just once, let out a tiny yawn, and fell right back to sleep. A new chapter, their most beautiful one yet, had just begun. The hospital stay was 5 long days. The tear, the blood pressure, it was a lot. Emeka slept right there on the floor beside my bed every single night, just his shirt balled up for a pillow. He only bathed once in those 5 days, when I finally forced him to go home for clothes and bring me some Akamo. He came back smelling of Okada smoke and fear. When it was time to leave, the nurse handed us the baby, all wrapped up in a thin hospital shawl. The way Emeka carried her, you'd think she was made of the most delicate glass. Outside, the Okada riders were shouting, "Fine baby, Madam well done-o." Emeka paid one of them double, just to make sure he drove slowly. Back in our one room in Ojota, the naming ceremony was small, but the joy was so loud it filled every corner. My mother came all the way from Ikorodu, bringing 2 huge coolers of jollof rice and even a live goat. Emeka's elder sister traveled down from Onitsha with a bag of yams and a beautiful George wrapper for the baby. Our landlord was kind enough to let us use the passage, so neighbors brought out their plastic chairs and bags of pure water. The pastor from our small church arrived at 3 p.m. sharp. He prayed for a solid 30 minutes, his voice booming, and then he announced the names we had chosen. Her name shall be Typhola Waif. Typhialiwa, God's love is enough. Ifioma, a beautiful thing. She shall be called Typh, for short. The celebration was on. Money was sprayed, small notes that the kids scrambled for with shrieks of delight. Emeka's mother danced with so much energy her gelly fell sideways. I just sat on the mattress, still weak but smiling, holding Typh close to my chest as everyone took turns carrying her and showering her with blessings. That night, after the last guest had left and the compound was quiet again, Emeka locked the door. He turned off the small bulb and lay down beside me and our daughter on the mattress. The baby was right there between us, her tiny fists curled up like little ferns. In the dark, Emeka whispered, "You see what we make?" My voice was still hoarse from all the screaming and labor, but I answered, "Not the most beautiful thing for this life." And we slept like that, all 3 of us touching, breathing the same small air in our little room. The first 3 months were a battle. Typh cried every single night, from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. The doctor said it was colic. We tried everything, Gripex, warm water on her tummy, even the herbal mixture my mother brought from the village. Nothing worked. Emeka would walk the room for hours, carrying her, singing every church song he knew. When those ran out, he sang Sunny Ade songs. Then he moved on to every Igbo folklore he could remember. When his voice gave out, he hummed. When his legs shook from exhaustion, he'd sit and rock her. When he literally dozed off standing, I'd take over. My nipples cracked and bled. Breastfeeding was agony. I cried through the pain, but I refused to give her formula. My mama no give me an in, I no go give my Pekin, I declared, even when the pain made me see stars. Sleep became a distant memory, something we only heard about. And money just vanished like smoke. Diapers, vaccines, constant bouts of malaria. The wooden box where we kept our savings just gave and gave until it echoed when you knocked on it. But every morning, just as the Harmattan sun slipped through the window and touched Taif's face, she would smile in her sleep. A tiny, toothless smile that had the power to make us forget the entire night of struggle. At 4 months, she laughed out loud for the very first time. Emeka was making silly faces, crossing his eyes and sticking out his tongue. Taif just stared for a moment, and then she let out this one clear, perfect ha, followed by a whole string of giggles that sounded just like tiny bells. I recorded it on my small phone and must have played it back 50 times that day. By 6 months, our Taif could sit up all by herself, her fat little thighs spread out like dough, holding her own bottle. She had Emeka's wide nose and my stubborn chin, but her eyes were completely her own, always watching, always thinking. Then at 9 months, she started crawling. Our room was too small for any real exploration, so she'd just crawl in circles, chasing cockroaches, chasing shadows, chasing absolutely nothing at all. Emeka nailed pieces of carton to the wall so she wouldn't hit her head on the rough cement. Her first word wasn't mama. It was light. Nipa had taken the light, as usual, and Emeka was lighting our small lantern. Taif pointed her tiny finger and said, clear as day, lay it. I screamed with joy and carried her around the room like I'd just won the lottery. And at 1 year old, she walked. Just 3 wobbly steps from the mattress into Emeka's waiting arms, before collapsing in a fit of laughter. We clapped until our palms hurt. We had to borrow neighbors' phones to take pictures because we didn't have a good camera. In every single picture, Taif is reaching for something, her hair tied in 2 small puffs, her eyes just shining with plans. Anyone who saw her would always say the same thing. This Pekin fino. She go break many hearts. I would just smile and reply, nah God go break any heart way one break her own first. On her first birthday, we managed to buy a small cake from Tantalizers. It cost 5,000 naira, the most expensive thing we had bought in years. We sang happy birthday completely off-key, cut the cake with a table knife, and gave the biggest piece to Taif. She happily smeared it all over her face and laughed until she hiccuped. That night, Emeka opened the wooden box. It was almost empty now. He placed the one photograph we had managed to print at a business center inside. On the back, he wrote in blue marker, Taifulawaif, February 12, 2021. Thank you for coming. He closed the box, kissed it, and put it back under the bed. Outside, Legos kept moving. The Danfos were hooting, generators were coughing, people were shouting. But inside our small room, a father watched his daughter sleep, counting her breaths the way he once counted money. He didn't need that wooden box anymore to know that we were rich. We had her, and she was more than enough. The night Taif turned 1, the last of the plastic chairs had been returned, and a quiet fell over the compound. Emeka locked the door, put out the lantern, and slipped into the mattress beside Chika. Taif was fast asleep between them, her tiny arm flung over her head, her breath soft and milky. Chika broke the silence first, her voice a low whisper so she wouldn't wake the child. Emeka, do you want another one? The question lingered in the dark air. Emeka didn't reply right away. He shifted onto his side, propping his head on his hand to better see the outlines of his wife and daughter. Chika, look at this room. It's 12 by 10. The mattress is already touching the wall. Where would we put another child? On top of the wardrobe. Chika let out a quiet laugh, then stopped. The movement pulled at her cesarean scar, still a bit tender even after a whole year. I'm serious, she said. I know, he replied. Silence settled between them again, broken only by the roar of a Danfo bus on the express and a lone dog barking twice before giving up. Emeka spoke again, his words slow and measured. You know, when I hold Taif, I can't explain the feeling. It's like my heart just left my body and started walking around on 2 legs. If another baby comes now, I don't think I could love them as much as I love this one. My heart just wouldn't agree. Chika turned to face him, their noses almost touching in the darkness. You think it's only you? Every time she cries, my breasts ache like the milk wants to come out by force. But Emeka, there's no money. And that was the real conversation. It wasn't about a lack of love. They had an abundance of love. The problem was money. Their savings box was nearly empty. The hospital bills from Taif's birth, the endless vaccines, the bouts of malaria, the naming ceremony, even a small one, had drained everything. They were back to living hand to mouth, just like they did before they got married. Emeka continued, "If we have another child now, we'll just be bringing a child into this world to suffer. School fees will be a nightmare. Feeding them will be a struggle. We'll be chased out by the landlord over rent. I don't want my children to end up hawking water on the streets because their father didn't plan properly." Chika let out a long sigh. She had seen it all too often in their compound. There was Mama Ikena, with 6 children, all of them barefoot, the older ones carrying the younger ones to beg at the bus stop. There was Sister Bose, who seemed to have a baby every year and now slept at the church because her husband had run away. She reached out in the dark and gently touched Emeka's cheek. "So, what are we going to do?" "We're going to do family planning," he said, his voice firm. "A proper one. Not this withdrawal method that always makes you anxious. We'll go to the hospital, do something that will close shop for a few years. When we've made some good money, when Taif is in primary 3 or 4, when we have a 2-bedroom apartment, maybe even a car, then we'll open shop again. By then, I'll be able to love the second one just as much as I love this one." Chika was quiet for a long moment. "You won't be upset that I didn't give you a son right away?" Emeka chuckled softly. "What son? This girl right here already commands me like a general. When she points her little finger and says, 'Daddy, water,' I run like a delivery driver. A boy couldn't do this to me." Chika smiled in the darkness. She could hear the conviction in his voice. He meant every single word. The next morning, a Saturday, they bathed Taif together. They dressed her in the new frock Emeka's sister had sent from Onitsha and carried her to the same private hospital in Bagada where she was born. They met with the same calm doctor who had managed Chika's blood pressure during her pregnancy. She listened without judgment as they explained their decision. "Do you want spacing, or do you want to stop completely?" she asked. "Spacing," they answered in unison. The doctor recommended the implant. It offered 3 years of protection, a tiny rod placed under the skin of the arm, no daily pills to remember, and for most women, no side effects. Chika was nervous about the needle, but Emeka held her other hand tightly, distracting her with stories about the time he fixed a phone with a dead motherboard. Before she knew it, it was over. She barely felt the prick. The nurse gave them a small card with the removal date written on it, February 12, 2025. They placed the card inside their wooden savings box, like a promise to themselves and to their future. From that day forward, the decision became a part of who they were. When people asked, "When is the second one coming?" they would reply with one voice, "We are enjoying this one first." When Chika's mother would call and start her usual speech about giving Taif a sibling before she gets too old, Chika would calmly say, "Mummy, we are still recovering from the first one. When God says it is time, it will happen." When Emeka's uncle visited from the village and spent 2 hours lecturing on why a man isn't a man until he has a son, Emeka just smiled, served him a drink, and changed the subject to football. Inside their small room, their decision brought peace. It meant they could pour everything they had, their money, time, worries, and laughter, into one precious little girl. It meant Chika could go back to her job full-time when Taif turned 18 months, without the worry of another pregnancy. The choice wasn't about love. It was about the kind of life they wanted to give the children they brought into the world. For Emeka, it meant he could finally start saving for a bigger shop instead of putting money aside for another hospital bill. For Chika, it meant their daughter, Taif, slept soundly between them every single night, without another baby pushing her to the edge of the mattress. Sometimes, late at night, Chika would just watch Taif sleeping and feel this small, familiar ache. She'd imagine another child, maybe a little boy with Emeka's distinct tribal marks, or another girl with her own eyes. The feeling would come, and then it would pass. She'd lightly touch the tiny scar on her arm where the contraceptive implant was, and she'd whisper to herself, "Not yet." Emeka felt it too. There were evenings he'd come home from work, sweep Taif up into his arms until she was screaming with laughter, then just hold her close. He'd breathe her in like a man, trying to store up strength for a long journey. He never said the words out loud, but Chica knew. He was afraid that if another child came right now, he'd have to divide himself. And he just wasn't ready to give even a tiny piece of his heart away from this one precious girl. So, they kept their vow. Only one child, for now. They said it when they woke up in the morning. They said it when they sat down to count their money. They repeated it when Taif took her very first steps, when she said her first full sentence, "Daddy, come," when her first tooth came in, and even when she got sick with malaria and then recovered. Only one child, for now. And there, in the quiet of their small room, a wooden box under the bed held nothing but a photograph and a hospital card dated 2025. They held the one child they had just a little bit tighter, they loved her a little bit harder. And they believed with every stubborn bone in their bodies that tomorrow would be kind enough to let them keep their promise. By the time Taif was 2 years and 3 months old, every other child in their compound was already in school. Little Success, who lived next door, wore a tiny red and white checked uniform and carried a plastic lunchbox with Peppa Pig on it. The twins who lived upstairs left every morning, their shrill voices singing hymns. Even the gateman's daughter, who was only 2 weeks older than Taif, had started creche and would come home with crayon drawings of mango trees. But Taif had nothing but the sand in the compound to play with and her parents' loving arms. The big, fancy schools in Bogota and Magodo would send glossy flyers through the gate every term. Admission into creche and nursery 1 is ongoing, they'd announce. Fees, 350,000 naira per term. That included feeding, books, uniform, and even excursions. The flyers always said limited spaces. Chica would look at the flyer, fold it neatly, and slide it under the mattress with all the others she had collected. Then she'd open her small notebook and count their savings again, as if hoping the numbers might have magically changed overnight. They never did. So, they decided to turn their one-room apartment into a school. It started small. One Saturday morning, Emeka came home from Computer Village with a big sheet of white cardboard he had saved from a customer's new television box. He cut it into 4 large pieces and drew thick black lines on them with a permanent marker. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, all the way to Z. He carefully nailed the pieces to the wall above their mattress with small pins. Taif stood on the bed, her eyes wide with wonder, pointing. A is for. Chica asked. Apu, Taif shouted with glee. They clapped and cheered for her like she had just won a Nobel Prize. And that was how their classroom began. Every evening after work became lesson time. Emeka would close his shop by 7:30 p.m. and buy 2 sachets of pure water on his way home. He'd use the empty plastic sachets to make counting beads. He washed them clean, dried them in the sun, then punched holes in them with a hot nail and threaded them onto an old shoelace. 1 sachet, 2 sachet, 3 sachet. He would count slowly, and Taif would repeat after him, her tiny fingers trying to hold onto the slippery plastic. Chica bought a packet of chalk for 50 naira from her kiosk change and drew a giant alphabet snake on the bare cement floor. The head was A, and the tail was Z. Every morning, while she was pounding yam or washing plates, she would say, Taif, carry your leg, go visit letter M. And Taif would toddle along the snake, carefully stepping only on the letters, singing, M is for Mama. Their home was filled with learning and love, proving that a classroom isn't about 4 walls, but about the heart within them. In their small, single room, a world of learning bloomed for little Taif. Her parents, Emeka and Chica, couldn't afford school, so they built one for her right there. Every object in their home became a teaching tool. Empty milk tins turned into drums for her first lessons in rhythm. Old, colorful recharge cards weren't just trash, they were flashcards. Yellow for numbers, green for colors. Bottle caps were her first puzzle, sorted by red, blue, and white. When the power came on, it was a celebration. They'd gather around Emeka's old phone, playing nursery rhymes from YouTube. The volume would be cranked up, and the 3 of them would dance with pure joy until the battery finally gave out. Sundays, after church, were for serious school. While other families rested, Emeka, Chica, and Taif sat on their mattress for lessons. Emeka was the math teacher. He'd hold up a spoon and ask, see this spoon? 1 spoon. If Daddy give you 1 more spoon, how many you get? Taif, beaming with pride, would hold up 2 tiny fingers and shout, 2 poon. Chica taught language. She'd find old, discarded cement bags and draw on them. A sun, a house, a tree, a goat. Taif had to name each one in 3 languages: English, Yoruba, and Igbo. Son, Chica would ask. Taif would think for a moment, then reply, Son, Oruanwu. And every correct answer was met with thunderous applause from her parents. Taif thrived on their praise. In 2 years, they only ever bought her 1 book. It was a second-hand ABC book, a payment Emeka received instead of cash. The cover was torn, the pages were brown and worn, but to Taif, it was treasure. She slept with it under her pillow, and in the morning, she'd read it, pointing at the pictures and weaving her own magical stories. By the time she was 2.5, Taif was a little genius. She could recite the alphabet forwards and even backwards. That was her special party trick. She could count to 30 in English, 20 in Yoruba, and 10 in Igbo. She could write her name in shaky capital letters on any surface she could find: the wall, the floor, even her dad's arm. She knew her colors, her shapes, and sang all the classic nursery rhymes with perfect actions. Her brilliance didn't go unnoticed. Soon, neighbors started bringing their own children over. Auntie Chica, please teach my success small, they'd plead. Chica, with her ever-present smile, would just say, bring him after 4. Before long, their tiny room was filled with 4 extra children every evening, all huddled on the floor, learning their letters from Taif's cement bag drawings. Chica never asked for a single kobo. Her only request was for each mother to bring a sachet of water so the children could have a proper water break, just like in a real school. But as Taif grew smarter, a different kind of lesson began, one her parents hadn't prepared for. When they went to the market or to church, children in crisp school uniforms would stare at Taif's simple clothes and ask loudly, "Which school you day?" Confused, Taif would look at her parents, then whisper, "I day my house school." The other children would laugh. "House school no be school, oh," they'd jeer. After a while, Taif stopped answering. She grew distant from the other kids in the compound, who now chattered about playgroups, classmates, and things their teachers said. Taif only had Mama and Daddy. She became quiet, hiding behind her mother's wrapper, her big, old soul eyes just watching the world go by. The real heartbreak came during a birthday party they attended. Taif didn't know how to play with the other children. She just stood by herself, watching them as if they were strangers. That night, after Taif was asleep, Chica broke down. "She knows Sabi play with other children again," she whispered to Emeka, her face buried in her hands. Emeka sat beside her, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. "I teach her A to Z, 1 to 30, colors, shapes, but I no fit teach her how to get friends. That one na school go teach am." They stayed awake all night, the lantern burning low, doing the math over and over. If they moved to a cheaper apartment, if Chica started selling Acura in the evenings, if Emeka took on more repair jobs at night, maybe, just maybe, they could afford 2 terms at a small, local school. Not a fancy one, but a school with teachers and other children. At 5 in the morning, Emeka opened a wooden box he hadn't touched in months. Inside lay a photograph, a medical card, and a small stack of money. He counted it all, looked at Chica, and with a voice full of resolve, he said, "We go try." Chica nodded, tears glistening in the dim light. Their homeschool had been a brilliant success. It had given Taif a foundation stronger than many children twice her age. But now, it was time for her to step into a bigger classroom. That morning, as Taif ate her breakfast, Chica drew one last letter on the floor with chalk. S. S for school, she said. Taif looked up, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Mummy, I day teach clap clap there?" Chica's heart both broke and soared. "Yes, baby," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Dem go teach you plenty clap clap." For the first time in years, the wooden box was opened wide, ready to give everything it had, so one small girl could finally find her place in the world. This story is a powerful reminder that a parent's love and dedication are the greatest educational tools of all. It also shows us the incredible importance of community and friendship in a child's development. The invitation arrived through a customer, Auntie Bose. The same Auntie Bose who had once teased them for their suffering love. Her son, David, was turning 3, and the party was at their new home in Magodo GRA. She insisted that Chica and Emeka bring their daughter, Taif. Bring that your fine Pekin come play with better children, she'd said, her laughter echoing through the phone. All these computer village children no go spoil em. Chica's first instinct was to refuse. Magoto felt like a different universe, a place they didn't belong. But Emeka, in his quiet, thoughtful way, disagreed. Make we go, he said softly. At least once. Make Taif see something different. And so, they began to prepare as if they were traveling abroad. The night before, Chica washed Taif's best dress, a yellow frock with tiny flowers, 3 separate times, just to be sure no stain remained. She pressed it with their heavy charcoal iron, standing in the cramped passage because their room was too suffocatingly hot. Emeka took on the task of polishing Taif's only pair of proper shoes, white sandals they'd bought for last Christmas. He worked on them until they shone like new, reflecting the dim light of their home. The gift was another major production. They wrapped it with painstaking care, a plastic doll with real hair, a luxury that cost them 4,000 naira at Ikeja. That was nearly a week's profit. Saturday morning dawned with a sense of nervous anticipation. They bathed early, dressing Taif in her yellow frock. Chica styled her hair into 2 big puffs, secured with matching yellow ribbons. She rubbed a small amount of Vaseline on Taif's cheeks until they glowed with a healthy sheen. Taif looked like an angel who had accidentally wandered into Ojota. The journey itself was an odyssey. It took 2 hours and 3 different buses. Taif sat on Chica's lap the entire way, her head swiveling left and right, trying to take in everything. The tall, imposing houses, the clean, wide roads, the children her age strapped into car seats, looking out from their own private worlds. When they finally reached the estate gate, they were met by security men in crisp, intimidating uniforms who asked for an invitation card. It was a moment of stark realization. Ani Bose had to come out herself to vouch for them, her presence a key to unlock this foreign world. Inside the compound, the scene was overwhelming, almost too beautiful to be real. A massive white canopy covered half the street, sheltering guests from the sun. Balloons in gleaming gold and blue floated everywhere, tethered like miniature hot air balloons. In the middle of it all stood a real bouncy castle, alive with the screams and laughter of children jumping with abandon. A clown in full makeup skillfully twisted balloons into dogs and swords, while a man in a crisp chef's uniform carved chicken at a long, laden table. Another table held a magnificent 3-tiered cake, so tall it seemed to need its own ladder. The air was filled with music, Baby Shark, and Jerusalema, played at a perfect, pleasant volume. A professional photographer with a large camera roamed the party, capturing perfect, smiling moments. Taif's small hand tightened its grip on Chica's. She said nothing, her eyes wide. Auntie Bose rushed over to them, her gelly towering over her. See fine people, she exclaimed. Taif, come carry goodie bag. Before Chica could say a word, Auntie Bose had swept Taif away. The goodie bag was surprisingly heavy, filled with sweets, biscuits, Capri Sun, and toys, all in shiny, enticing packaging. They were shown to a table near the back, away from the center of the action. Most of the guests were already there. Mothers draped in expensive lace, fathers in starched senator wares, and children in party dresses that likely cost more than Emeka's monthly rent. Chica suddenly felt her simple Ankara wrapper shrink on her body, inadequate and out of place. Emeka's shirt, though neatly ironed, was clearly old, its collar softened with wear. They sat quietly, feeling like spectators at a show they hadn't bought tickets for. The children, they were different. They moved in confident packs, shouting to each other in fast, clipped British accents. Amelia, come, let's do TikTok. Jaden, don't touch my iPad. Mummy, can I have another cupcake? They knew games Chica had only ever seen on YouTube. Musical chairs with a proper sound system, pass the parcel with endless layers of gift wrap, and pin the tail on the donkey with a large, professionally printed poster. When the clown asked for volunteers, a forest of 20 small hands shot up instantly. Taif remained at the edge of it all, a silent observer. Auntie Bose tried to encourage her, pushing her gently toward the bouncy castle. Taif took 2 hesitant steps, saw the wild jumping, the frantic shouting, the casual pushing, and immediately stepped back. She returned to Chica's side, clutching her mother's wrapper like a lifeline. Chica's heart began to crack, a slow, painful fracture. Emeka tried next. He carried Taif over to the balloon man. The clown, with a practiced flourish, twisted a pink poodle in under 30 seconds. Taif took it with 2 hands, her small, clear voice saying, "Thank you, sir." Then she came right back and sat quietly on Emika's lap, holding the balloon but not playing with it. During the cake cutting, all the children rushed forward, singing "Happy Birthday" in loud, confident voices. Taif stayed seated. Chica had to lift her up just so she could see David blow out the candles. When the photographer shouted, "Everybody say cheese," Taif's mouth remained firmly closed. Food was served, not on paper plates, but on proper ceramic ones. Jollof rice, fried rice, moi moi in individual ramekins, and chicken pieces the size of a grown man's fist. Chica filled 1 plate for the 3 of them to share. Taif ate 3 small spoonfuls and then quietly announced she was okay. Emika pretended he wasn't hungry. Chica forced herself to swallow the food, just so it wouldn't go to waste. At one point, a little girl in a sparkling pink gown, looking like a princess, walked up to their table. She looked directly at Taif. "Hello, what's your name?" she asked. "Taif," she answered softly, her voice barely a whisper. "Which school do you go to?" Taif looked up at Chica, then her eyes dropped to the floor. "I day my house school." The girl laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, but it was loud and clear. "House school? That's not a real school." She turned and ran back to her friends, her laughter trailing behind her. Soon after, a small group of children were staring at Taif, whispering among themselves. One boy pointed a finger and said, just loud enough for them to hear, "See her sandals, nah old-fashioned." Taif heard it. Chica saw the exact moment the words landed. Taif moved closer to Emika, pressing her small body against his and burying her head in his chest. Chica felt hot tears burning behind her eyes. She blinked hard, fiercely, refusing to let them fall. She would not cry here. Not in this place. The party lasted 4 hours, an eternity. By the time Auntie Bose called a cab to take them to the bus stop, paying for it herself and waving away Emika's protests, Taif was fast asleep on Chica's shoulder. She was still clutching the pink balloon dog in one hand and the heavy goodie bag in the other. The journey home was shrouded in a heavy silence. Taif slept through it all, oblivious to the turmoil in her parents' hearts. Emika just stared out the window, his face a mask of thoughts Chica couldn't read. Chica watched the pink balloon bobbing gently against the roof of the bus with every bump in the road. And with each gentle tap, she felt something inside her chest break open, leaving a raw, aching emptiness in its place. It was almost 9 at night when they finally got home. Emika laid their daughter, Taif, gently on the mattress. She was so tired, she didn't even stir. Her little yellow dress was dusty. One of her hair ribbons had come loose, and her white sandals were scuffed from a day that was supposed to be fun. Chica just sat on a small stool, crying silently. Emika locked the door, sat on the floor beside her, and took her hand. After a long while, Chica's whisper broke the silence. "She can't talk with them," she said, her voice filled with pain. "She doesn't know how to play their games. She just stands there, like a stranger." Emika's voice was rough with emotion. "We thought we were helping her by keeping her home, but we were just caging her." Chica wiped her face with the corner of her wrapper. "All the things we teach her here, it's not enough. Those children already know so much about the world. They already have friends. They have confidence. My baby just watches them like they're on a television." That's when Emika made a decision. He pulled out a small wooden box from under the bed and opened it. Inside was a small envelope holding all their savings. He counted the money slowly under the dim lantern light. 187,000 naira. He looked up at Chica, his eyes determined. "We will find a school," he declared. "Even if it's the smallest one. Even if we have to walk to work every day. She must start this September." Chica nodded, tears still streaming down her face. But these were different tears now. They were tears with purpose, with direction. Emika put the money back, closed the box, and pushed it deep under the bed, like a soldier preparing for battle. Outside, the city was still alive with party lights. But inside that small room, 2 parents made a vow. Their daughter would never again be the lonely child on the sidelines, holding a balloon she was too afraid to play with. They would do whatever it took. The very next Monday, Chica and Emika began their mission. They barely slept, whispering plans to each other in the dark, while Taif slept soundly between them. In the morning, Emika did something he'd never done before. He closed his shop for half the day. With Taif on their backs, They traveled across 3 different local government areas, searching for any school that would accept a 2-year-old and not dismiss them at first glance. They saw every kind of school imaginable. There were the ones that smelled of fresh paint and new money, with shiny marble floors and an iPad on every tiny desk. The fees started at 600,000 naira per term. The receptionist would look at their simple clothes and tell them to wait for a manager who never seemed to appear. Then there were the schools that smelled of despair. Leaking roofs, broken plastic chairs, and teachers smoking out back. Yet, their fees were still a staggering 250,000 naira because of uniforms and books. They saw schools that looked perfect from the outside, with high fences and beautiful signboards. But when Chika asked to see the classroom for the little ones, she found 30 children crammed onto mats, with one exhausted teacher shouting, "Sit down," over and over. By Wednesday evening, they were completely worn out. Their feet were swollen, and their hope was deflating like a punctured tire. But then, on Thursday, a customer at Emeka's shop mentioned a place called Bright Minds Academy. "It's not too big, not too small," the customer said. "The woman who owns it is a good Christian woman." They went the next morning, their hearts heavy with a mix of hope and weariness. The school was a converted 2-story house on a quiet street. It had a simple blue gate and cream-colored walls. In the small playground, there were 2 swings and a slide that had seen better days. A hand-painted sign read, "Bright Minds Academy, Raising Champions for Christ." Inside the gate, the fees were written on a small blackboard. Creche and nursery, 220,000 naira per term. Admission form, 5,000 naira. Uniform and books, 25,000 naira. Payable in full before school starts. Chika's heart sank. The total was still more than everything they had saved. They almost turned around and left right then. But just as they were about to leave, the headmistress, a calm woman in her 50s named Mrs. Okonkwo, called them into her office. She had kind eyes that peered from behind her glasses. She listened patiently as Chika, her voice trembling, explained everything. How Taif had never been to school, how they had tried to teach her at home, and how they had saved every single naira they could. Mrs. Okonkwo then turned to Taif and asked her a few gentle questions. "What's your name?" "Taifalawaif." "How old are you?" 2 years and 4 months. "Count to 10 for Auntie." But little Taif didn't stop at 10. She counted all the way to 20 without taking a breath. And then, just for fun, she sang the alphabet backwards. She loved the way the woman's eyes widened in surprise. The woman, Mrs. Okonkwo, let out a big, warm laugh. "This one no be creche materialo. She fit into nursery 1 direct. But we go manage her for nursery because of age." She turned to Taif's parents, Emeka and Chika, and saw the worry etched on their faces. Her voice softened. "Bring whatever you fit pay now. The rest, when God do am." That single act of kindness was all they needed. Emeka and Chika left the school feeling like they were walking on air. That night, sitting on their mattress on the floor, they opened the old wooden box for what they knew would be the last time. This box was their bank, their hope chest, their future. Emeka pulled out every single envelope, every folded note, every coin they had painstakingly rolled in paper. Chika added the small purse where she kept the profits from her little kiosk. Emeka even brought out his December bonus, 47,000 naira wrapped in black plastic, a secret stash he'd been hiding even from himself. Chika didn't hesitate. She added the 18,000 naira she had saved up for new Christmas clothes. They spread the money on the floor and counted it like children playing a game. 187,000 from the box, 47,000 from the bonus, 18,000 from the Christmas fund, 15,000 from a digital account they had sworn never to touch, and 13,000 in loose cash from the kiosk drawer. The total was 280,000 naira. Exactly. They stared at the cash spread across the mattress, a rainbow built from years of sacrifice and sweat. Emeka's voice trembled as he said, "We fit do am. We can do it." Chika began to cry, but these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears for the journey. These were the very notes that had slept beside them for years. They had survived COVID, bouts of malaria, the costs of a naming ceremony, and unexpected hospital bills. This money was supposed to buy them a small plot of land one day, or maybe a bigger shop. It was meant to be the start of Taif's university fund, years down the line. But now, it was all going towards a sky blue pinafore, white socks, and a plastic school bag with Peppa Pig on it. It was going towards a chance for their brilliant daughter. The very next morning, they closed their shop and kiosk again. They carefully bathed Taif and dressed her in her second-best dress. With Taif in their arms, they returned to Bright Minds Academy. Mrs. Okonkwo was surprised to see them back so soon. "We don't bring the money," Emeka announced, placing a thick envelope on her desk like a sacred offering. Mrs. Okonkwo counted the money slowly, her lips moving silently with each note. When she finished, she looked up, and her own eyes were filled with tears. "God bless Una," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This kind Pekin deserved better. A child like this deserves the best." She took out a receipt book and wrote it herself in big, bold handwriting. Received from Mr. and Mrs. Emeka Ease, the sum of 250,000 naira only. For nursery admission, uniform, books, and feeding. Balance, nil. She handed them the receipt and a small bag. Inside were 2 pinafores, 2 white blouses, 2 pairs of white socks, a red sports uniform, a school bag, exercise books, crayons, and a plastic plate and spoon. Chika clutched the bag to her chest and just broke down, crying right there in the office. Mrs. Okonkwo didn't say a word. She just hugged her like a mother would. Little Taif, confused by the tears, patted her mother's leg and said, "Mummy, no cry. I go school now." And through their tears, they all laughed. On the way home, they stopped at the market. They bought one last packet of diapers, the final luxury they would allow themselves for a while, and a small pair of black school shoes that cost 4,000 naira. Emeka paid without even blinking. That night, they laid out all the new school items on the mattress as if they were precious jewels. The uniforms, the books, the tiny shoes. Taif touched each item with a look of pure wonder, her eyes glued to the Peppa Pig school bag. She insisted on putting it on her back and paraded around their small room, shouting with joy, "I dey go school. I dey go school." Emeka grabbed his old phone and took a picture. The 3 of them, Taif dwarfed by the oversized bag, Chika laughing with tear tracks still on her cheeks, and Emeka trying his best to look serious, became the new photograph for the now empty wooden box. After Taif finally fell asleep, clutching her new bag like a teddy bear, Emeka took the wooden box outside. He turned it upside down and shook it hard. Nothing fell out. Not a single coin. Not one kobo. He brought the box back inside and placed it gently under the bed. It was now just an empty shell. He whispered to it, the way you might speak at a graveside, "Thank you. You don't do your work. You've done your job." Chika quietly closed the lid and pushed the box far under the bed, out of sight. Tomorrow was Wednesday, Taif's first day of school. The box had given its life so that a little girl could truly begin hers. And for the first time in years, even though their pockets were completely empty, the room felt so much lighter. It was filled not with money, but with hope. Last night was a long one. Chika couldn't sleep. Every hour, she'd wake up and check. Was the new uniform still there, hanging perfectly on the nail behind the door? Were the shoes still polished to a mirror shine? Was the little Peppa Pig bag still packed just right? 2 spare panties, a small towel, a packet of biscuits, a water bottle, new crayons, the school plate, and spoon, and a tiny bottle of hand wash she'd bought with her last 500 naira. Her husband, Emeka, he pretended to be asleep, but she could hear him, turning, sighing, whispering prayers in Igbo under his breath. It was a big day. Then, at 4:47 in the morning, their little girl, Taif, woke up. She sat bolt upright on the mattress and whispered loudly, "Mummy, is it school time?" We all just laughed. It was that nervous kind of laughter you have right before a big battle. By 5:30, it felt like the whole neighborhood was awake because of us. Our neighbors were poking their heads out, watching the whole ceremony unfold. Sister Bose even took out her phone to record a Taif's first day of school video. Mama Ikena came over and gave Taif a sweet. She said, "Study hard, okay? No playing with boys." And then, at exactly 6:15 a.m., we stepped out. Taif looked like a little angel. She had on her sky blue pinafore over a crisp white blouse, white socks folded perfectly at her ankles, and those black shoes shining like they were made of glass. We'd braided her hair into 4 cornrows, with pink beads at the ends that clicked together when she walked. The Peppa Pig bag was almost as big as she was, but it sat so proudly on her little shoulders. The night before, I had spent hours sewing a tiny name tag into every single piece of her clothing. Taifaloaf Easy, Nursery 1, all in red thread. Emeka, being the amazing father he is, carried her on his shoulders the whole way to the bus stop, just so her new shoes wouldn't get dusty. I carried the diaper bag, just in case, and a little bag with extra biscuits. When we got to the bus, the conductor saw Taif in her full uniform and shouted, "Ojo to Afako, come on in with your change." But then, he wouldn't take our money. He just declared to everyone, "First day of school is a free ride," and the whole bus started clapping for her. It was such a special moment. We arrived at the school gate at 7:25 a.m. There were other parents there, dropping off their kids in these big, shiny SUVs. Security guards in smart blue uniforms opened the gate with big smiles. A teacher was writing names in a huge register. The headmistress, Mrs. Okonkwo, was standing right at the entrance. She was greeting every single child by name, even though it was only the second week of the term. When she saw Taif, she just opened her arms wide and said, "Welcome, our big girl." Taif got shy and buried her face in Emika's neck. We walked her down to her classroom, Nursery 1. It was this long room with low tables and colorful little plastic chairs. The walls were covered in posters of alphabets and numbers, and there was a cozy corner with mats and pillows for nap time. About 15 other children were already there. Some were crying, some were playing, and a few were clinging tightly to their mothers. Taif's teacher, Miss Blessing, was young and had such a gentle, smiling face. She knelt right down to Taif's level. "Hello, princess. My name is Ani Blessing. Will you be my friend?" Taif looked at us, then at the teacher, and just gave a tiny, shy nod. My throat felt so tight. I knelt down too. "Taif, Mummy and Daddy are going to work now. We'll come back to get you when school is over. Be a good girl. Greet your teachers. Eat your food. And if you need to go potty, just tell Ani Blessing, okay?" She nodded again, but her eyes were already starting to get shiny with tears. Emika put her down gently. The moment her shoes touched the floor, she started to cry. It was that quiet, heartbreaking sob that little kids do when they trying so hard to be brave, but just see a ant. My heart felt like it was splitting in two. Miss Blessing scooped her up right away, rubbing her back and soothing her. "Don't worry, Mummy. The first day is always like this. By tomorrow, she'll be running right in." Mrs. Okonkwo came over again. "Mr. and Mrs. Ease, go to your work in peace. We will take care of her like an egg." But I just couldn't move. I stood at the door, watching my baby on the teacher's hip, tears rolling silently down her face, her little hand reaching out for us. Emika took my hand and pulled me gently. "We have to go. If we stay, it will only be worse." We walked backward out of the school, waving and waving until the big gate closed. The second that gate shut, I just burst into tears, right there on the street. Emika held me while people on motorcycles and on foot passed by. Some of them stared, but some gave us these smiles of understanding. They knew. "She'll be fine," he kept saying, but I could hear his own voice shaking. We didn't go straight to work. We couldn't. We found a quiet spot under a big tree near the school and just sat there until 9 a.m. We were waiting, just in case they called us, in case she cried too much. But nobody called. Then, at 9:15, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. My heart just stopped. It was Miss Blessing. "Hello, Mummy Taif." Taif has stopped crying. She's already made 2 new friends. She's playing with blocks right now. Come and see if you don't believe me. I started laughing and crying all at the same time. I put the phone on speaker so Emika could hear it too. In the background, we could hear the sound of children singing. "Good morning, good morning. How are you today?" Emika wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and said, "Thank you, Auntie. God bless you." We finally stood up, brushed the sand off our clothes, and went to face the day. We were poorer than we had been in years, having spent so much on school fees and supplies, but we felt lighter than we had in months. At exactly 1:55 p.m., I was back at that school gate. I was the first parent there. My heart was beating so loud I was sure the security guard could hear it. At 2 p.m. sharp, the gate opened. Children started pouring out, holding their teachers' hands. And then I saw her. Taif was near the end of the line, walking between Miss Blessing and another little girl in the same uniform. She looked tired, her eyes were a little red, but she wasn't crying. A wave of relief just washed over me. This was it. This was the start of a whole new chapter for our family, and we were ready for it. The moment Taif saw her, she ran as fast as her short legs could carry her, shouting, "Mummy." Chica scooped her up, lifting her high, kissing every inch of her little face. "How was school?" she asked. Taif's answer came in one long, excited rush. Mummy, we sang songs. We drew a house. I ate all my rice and meat. Auntie Blessing said I'm very smart. And I have a new friend. Her name is Peace. She has a Peppa Pig lunchbox too. We even went to the toilet together. I didn't mess myself up. Chica laughed until happy tears streamed down her face. That night, they all sat on the mattress and listened to Taif tell the story of her day at least 10 different times, each version more detailed than the last. She told them about the boy who cried until he vomited, the girl who generously shared her biscuits, and the teacher who pronounced Taif's name correctly on the very first try. She finally drifted off to sleep, still proudly wearing her school uniform because she absolutely refused to take it off. As Taif slept, Emeka quietly opened the empty wooden box they had used to save the school fees. He turned it upright and placed the one thing they had brought home from school inside, a single crayon drawing. It showed 3 simple stick figures standing under a bright yellow sun. Underneath the drawing, in shaky capital letters that Taif had written with help, were the words, "My mummy, my daddy, me." Emeka closed the box gently. All the money was gone. The box was empty. But for the very first time in their married life, the future felt incredibly full. Thursday morning began with pure triumph. Taif woke up at 5:40 a.m., already calling out, "Mummy, school, school." She had slept in her uniform again, and Chica had to lovingly persuade her to take it off so she could wash it overnight. The pinafore now smelled of sunlight soap and the sweet scent of a small child, but it was clean and freshly pressed. Chica packed the same Peppa Pig bag, but this time she added one extra, special item, a small photograph of the 3 of them. She'd had it printed at a business center for 200 naira. She carefully slipped it into the front pocket of the bag and whispered to it, "Stay with her when we can't be there." At the school gate, there were no tears from Taif. She waved like a big girl, shouting, "Bye, Mummy. Bye, Daddy," and marched right in, confidently holding Miss Blessing's hand. Chica stood there, watching until the big blue gate closed. The security man chuckled and said, "Madam, go to work. Your child has become a school pro overnight." The day flew by in a blur of small victories. Emeka managed to sell 3 cracked screens and complete a charging port repair before noon. Each time he finished a job, he'd glance at the clock and smile, imagining Taif singing her morning songs or sharing her lunch with her new friend, Peace. Chica found herself selling more recharge cards than usual, humming, "If you're happy and you know it," as she served her customers. At 1:50 p.m., Chica was back at the gate, early as always. When Taif ran out, she was wearing a paper crown made from an old calendar. "Mummy, look. I won best behavior today," she exclaimed. The crown was a bit too big and kept slipping over her eyes. Chica adjusted it for her, took about 100 photos with her small phone, and carried her daughter home like a cherished trophy. That evening, Taif had new stories to share. They learned the color green and went on a hunt for green things all around the classroom. A boy named Emmanuel had an accident and cried, but Auntie Blessing cleaned him up without even a hint of shouting. They danced to head, shoulders, knees, and toes 5 times in a row because all the children begged for more. And of course, Peace shared her biscuits again. Before bed, Taif made her parents kneel and pray just like they did in school. "Thank you, Jesus, for today," she recited. "Thank you for my mummy and daddy. Thank you for my school. Bless Auntie Blessing and Peace. Please let tomorrow come fast. Amen." Chica and Emeka whispered, "Amen," with lumps in their throats. Thursday night felt safe, protected. It felt like nothing could possibly go wrong now. But there was one small conversation from the day before that Chica had almost forgotten. On Wednesday, as she was dropping Taif off, one of the male teachers, a tall, light-skinned man who always seemed to smile a little too widely, had walked past them carrying a box of toys. He stopped, looked Taif up and down, and then said to Chica, "Fine Pekin. Madam, tomorrow don't put her in a diaper again. She's a big girl now. Just underwear. We'll manage if anything happens." His smile showed a few too many teeth. Chica had laughed nervously and replied, "Okay, sir, no problem." The memory, a tiny, unsettling whisper, briefly surfaced before being pushed away by the evening's joy. That night, she told Emeka about the teacher's request. He frowned for a moment, then just shrugged. "It's a normal thing," he said. "Many schools don't like diapers for the nursery kids. If she pees a little, they'll clean her up." Friday was sports day. The children were to wear red shorts and white t-shirts instead of their usual pinafores. Chica had only one pair of proper panties for Taif, pink with tiny flowers, a gift from the previous Christmas. The rest were just training pants with cartoon prints. She hesitated, looking between the two, then chose the pink ones because they looked more big girl. Still, a knot of worry made her pack one of the training pants into Taif's school bag, just in case. On Thursday night, she almost caved and put a diaper back on her daughter. But then she remembered the teacher's words and the way the other mothers had looked at her on Wednesday when they saw the bulge under Taif as pinafore. She didn't want anyone laughing at her daughter again. So, that night, Taif slept in the little pink pants. Chica lay awake long after Emika's snores filled the room, listening to the fan struggle against the Legos heat. There was a tight knot in her stomach she couldn't quite name. She tried to soothe herself. It's just a mother's worry, she thought. Every mother worries during the first week of school. She told herself the school looked decent enough. The headmistress, Mrs. Okonkwo, was a Christian woman. There were female teachers everywhere you looked. The main gate had a strong, heavy lock. Her daughter wasn't alone. There were plenty of other children. She repeated it to herself over and over. Everything was fine. And she almost believed it. But at 3:12 in the morning, she quietly got out of bed. She crept over to Taif's school bag, unzipped it, and slipped the spare training pant deeper inside, tucking it right next to the small bottle of Dettol and the jar of Vaseline, just in case. Then she went back to bed, pulled Taif close, and breathed in the comforting smell of baby powder and new uniform. Thursday was still safe, but Friday was coming. Friday broke hot and loud. The cool Harmattan breeze had vanished overnight, and Lagos had returned to its usual wet blanket heat. By 6 a.m., the room was already sticky and close. Taif woke up singing, "Today is sports day, today is sports day," just like she'd heard the older children chanting the day before. Chica dressed her carefully. The white school t-shirt was a little big, so she rolled the sleeves up once. The red shorts stopped mid-thigh. White socks were pulled up high, and the black school shoes had been polished again the night before. Without the pinafore to cover them, the pink panties with their tiny flowers were completely visible. Chica stared at them for a long moment, a flicker of doubt crossing her mind. But she pushed it away, folded the spare training pant, and tucked it at the very bottom of the Peppa Pig bag anyway. Emika had closed his shop for the morning so he could drop Taif at school himself. He carried her on his shoulders all the way to the bus stop, singing along with her. Left leg, right leg, who is the champion? Taif would shout back, "Me. I be the champion." People passing by on the street smiled at the sight. When they got on the bus, the conductor waved their fare away again. "Sports Day is a free ride," he announced with a grin. But when they arrived at the school gate, the atmosphere was completely different from the usual quiet drop-offs. Loud music blasted from a huge speaker, Burna Boy, then a children's version of Jerusalema. Kids in their red and white uniforms were running everywhere, a blur of excitement. Parents who normally just dropped their children and drove off were now parking their cars and coming inside, eager to watch the mini marching parade. Some of them were even carrying professional-looking cameras. Emika's chest swelled with pride. He had never seen Taif in a crowd this happy, this alive. They walked her towards the assembly ground where teachers were busy arranging small plastic chairs in neat rows, class by class. The creche and nursery children were seated right at the front. A male teacher in a bright red tracksuit was directing the parents. "Mummy, please stand to that side so we don't block the camera." Chica recognized him immediately. He was the same tall, light-skinned man who had told her to stop using diapers. Today, he had a whistle around his neck and was holding a clipboard. His name tag read MR.AD. Mr. Ade spotted Taif, and his face broke into that same wide, friendly smile. "Ah, our big girl is here. Come, come, Uncle Ade will carry you to your class." Before Chica could even respond, he had lifted Taif straight out of Emika's arms. Taif stiffened for just a second, her eyes darting back to her parents. But then she seemed to relax, probably because all the other little children were also being carried by their teachers. Chica's stomach gave one small, sharp twist, but she quickly pushed the feeling down. There were just too many people around, too many phones out recording everything. The headmistress, Mrs. Okonkwo herself, was standing on a small podium with a microphone. Emika sensed her unease and squeezed her hand. "She'll be fine," he whispered. "Let's go to work." But first, they had to take pictures. Emika had borrowed a neighbor's better phone the night before, just for this moment. Taif waved at them from Mr. Aid's hip. She had insisted on wearing the paper crown from yesterday, and perched on her head, it made her look like a tiny, triumphant queen. Chica kissed her 10 times. Emeka kissed her 5. They promised they would be back by 12:45, since school closed at 1 p.m. on Fridays. Mr. Ade just laughed. "Don't worry," he said, his voice full of confidence. "I'll watch her like she's my own." And with that, they left. The morning passed in a blur of customers and heat. Emeka fixed phones on autopilot, his hand steady but his mind far away. Every time his phone vibrated, he jumped, afraid it was the school. It never was. Chica sold recharge cards and pure water, smiling at customers while counting down the minutes. At 11:30, she closed the kiosk, bathed in the public bathroom, changed into her second-best wrapper, and started the journey to Afako. She reached the gate at 12:37 p.m., her heart beating with pride. She imagined Taif marching, collecting another crown, maybe even winning a plastic medal. Parents were already gathering. Phones were out. Some had brought cold maltina and small chops to celebrate with their children immediately after. At 1:05 p.m., the gate opened. Children poured out in their red and white sea, some running, some crying from tiredness, some sleeping on teachers' shoulders. Chica stood on tiptoes, searching for the familiar puffs and pink beads. Taif came out almost last. She was walking alone, no teacher holding her hand. Her crown was gone. Her face was blank, her eyes on the ground. The red shorts looked crooked, one side higher than the other. She walked slowly, as if her legs were heavy. When she saw Chica, she did not run. She only lifted her arms, the way babies do when they are too tired to speak. Chica's smile froze. She pushed through the crowd, lifted Taif, and pressed her close. "Baby, how was sports?" Taif said nothing. She put her head on Chica's shoulder and closed her eyes. Other mothers were hugging, laughing, taking pictures. Chica forced a smile for one woman who said, "You're Pekin fine-o." But inside, something cold was crawling up her spine. Taif felt hotter than usual, and she told herself, maybe she was just tired. Maybe she ran too much. Maybe she was hungry. She carried her all the way to the bus stop, singing softly to wake her up. Taif did not sing back. On the bus home, Taif slept the whole journey, mouth open, one shoe half falling off. Chica told herself, children sleep after sports day. It's normal. At home, she laid Taif on the mattress and tried to remove the uniform gently. Taif stirred, opened her eyes, then closed them again. Chica brought food, rice and stew she had kept since morning. Taif ate 3 spoons like a robot, her eyes far away. The cold feeling inside Chica grew. She decided a bath would wake her up. She fetched warm water, added Dettol, sat Taif on the small plastic stool, and began to sing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star the way Taif loved. Taif did not sing along. When Chica reached her private area to wash, Taif suddenly jerked and let out a sharp cry. Chica froze. She washed the back, no cry. She washed the front again, gently. Taif screamed, a thin, frightened sound. Chica's hand started shaking. She carried Taif to the mattress, laid her down, and opened her legs carefully. The pink pant with tiny flowers was soaked, not with urine, but with a watery discharge mixed with streaks of blood. The area was swollen, red, angry. There were small tears at the entrance. The world tilted. Chica heard herself scream, a sound she did not recognize. Neighbors rushed in. Emeka arrived 20 minutes later, his face white, his hands already trembling. They wrapped Taif in a wrapper, took the first Okada they saw, and flew to the hospital, Emeka shouting at the rider to go faster, faster, faster. Friday had come, and everything that was safe was gone. The Okada dropped them at the gate of a private clinic in Bagada at 4:11 p.m. Emeka paid the rider 2,000 naira without bargaining. The man refused to collect it at first, his eyes wide at the way Emeka was shaking. Inside the clinic, the receptionist took one look at Taif, limp in Chica's arms, eyes half closed, face gray, and shouted for the nurse on duty. They were rushed past the queue into a small consultation room that smelled of Dettol and fear. The doctor was an older woman with tired eyes and quick hands. She asked them to lay Taif on the examination couch. Chica could not let go. Emeka had to peel her fingers away one by one. The doctor closed the curtain. Chica stood outside it with Emeka, holding each other up like two people drowning. They did not speak. They could only hear Taif's small whimpers and the doctor's low, calm voice asking questions. Taif was too little to answer. When the curtain opened again, the doctor's face had changed. The tiredness was still there, but now it carried something heavier. "Come," she said quietly. "This story is a difficult one to hear, but it reflects a reality that many face. Child abuse is a global crisis, and it happens everywhere, in every community. The signs can be subtle: a change in behavior, unusual tiredness, unexplained fear. It's crucial that we, as a community, learn to recognize these signs and act on them. We must create a world where children are safe, believed, and protected." They followed her into a tiny office, a room so small it held only a single plastic chair and a calendar of Jesus carrying a lamb. The doctor didn't waste any words. "Your daughter has been sexually assaulted. There are bruises around the vulva, small lacerations inside the vagina, and a watery discharge mixed with blood. She has been penetrated by an adult object or penis." In an instant, the room tilted, and a loud roaring filled Chica's ears. It took her a moment to realize the sound was her own scream. Emeka caught her just before she hit the floor. The doctor's voice continued, steady and practiced, the way people speak when they've delivered the same devastating news too many times before. "She is 2 years and 4 months, she said. "The tears are fresh, within the last 6 hours. She will need antibiotics, pain relief, HIV prophylaxis, and hepatitis shots. We will also do tests for infections." It was Emeka who found his voice first, though it came out cracked, like broken glass. "Who?" he asked. "We don't know," the doctor replied. "You will have to report this to the police. We can swab for DNA if you bring the police within the next 24 hours. Chica was crying without sound now, tears streaming down her face in rivers, her mouth open, her chest heaving. She kept whispering the same words over and over again, a desperate, broken mantra. "My Pekin, my Pekin, my Pekin." The doctor scribbled a list of drugs and handed it to Emeka. Then she paused. "I'm sorry," she said, "but we cannot give you an official medical report here. The owner of the clinic doesn't allow it. The police will come and disturb us. You'll need to take her to another hospital for the official report." Emeka just stared at her, as if she were speaking in a language he couldn't understand. They paid 47,000 naira for the consultation and the first set of injections. Emeka counted out the notes with shaking fingers. It was nearly everything he had left in his pocket after paying the Okada driver. They carried their daughter, Taif, out of the clinic. She was awake now, her eyes glassy from the painkiller they had given her. She looked up at her mother and whispered, "Mummy, I want sleep for house." Chica pressed her face into Taif's small neck and just sobbed harder. This gut-wrenching scene is from the novel The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abi Dare. It's a moment that stays with you, a raw and powerful depiction of a parent's worst nightmare. The story explores themes of poverty, the vulnerability of children, and the failures of the systems meant to protect them. The doctor's chillingly detached tone, the parent's shattering grief, and the child's innocent whisper for comfort. It all combines into a scene that is both difficult to read and impossible to forget. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the world, and it highlights the incredible strength it takes to navigate such unimaginable trauma. What's so striking is how the author captures the different stages of shock and grief. The initial disbelief, the physical collapse, the frantic questions, and the overwhelming, silent sorrow. The detail about the cost, about that being all the money they had left, just adds another layer of desperation to their situation. It's not just an emotional crisis, it's a financial one, a systemic one.